today's Hindu analysis session with us, and before your one-on-one counseling session for you from our experts. So with the UPSC civil services, which correspond to your UPSC mains exam, while 3 have been picked up as fat, crisp, short bites for the prelims. Talking about the mains oriented articles which need a detailed analysis, the first article here has been picked up from The Hindu, New Delhi edition, page 1st. It says, 7 Indians who faced death row in Qatar, they have returned home, they are back in India. This means volumes for India-Qatar relationship. This also means a huge victory for India's diplomacy and foreign policy. Second article, page 6, talks about gender equality. What has the Indian government been doing at the global platform to promote gender equality? The third article, page number 7, is corresponding to political achievement, in fact, that how 2024 is going to be the year globally where majority of young voters will come out and cast their ballot. So this is going to be quite an interesting year because it will see a global very, very high voter turnout. What ramifications does it have for a young country like India? Young in the sense of its young demographic dividend. And now we will talk about the quick short prelim bites. The first one here is page number 12. This corresponds to ecology. We are talking about how the government wants to promote hygiene and sustainable sanitation practices in the hospitality industry. We are going to refer to a particular initiative that the government has taken here. The next article for prelims is once again from page 1st. It talks about retail inflation. Suddenly, it is easing now from spiking too high last November, December 2023 to now coming down a bit. What could this mean for the consumers? What could this mean for the economy? We will talk about that, and then we have a very interesting development from Science and Technology. That's page number 15 for you, where the article says that the Event Horizon Telescope, which is one of its own kinds, because it continues to intrigue us by giving us data about the black hole. So once again, it has brought a very interesting insight into black holes. We will talk about what is it, what could it mean for future astronomical researches. And now, without wasting any further second, let's hop on to the first article of the day. This is page number 1, and this corresponds to GS paper 2, International Relations. So we are talking about a massive triumph, we are talking about a big victory that the Indian government has received when it comes to international relations, when it comes to diplomacy. Although the news is covering the event, a new development, that how 7 Indians who were actually Navy veterans, they were the Navy personnel from India, they were working in Qatar. Now just 2 days back, they are finally released and now they are back to India. This development talks volumes about how smart international negotiations can sometimes mean milestones for relations between 2 countries, here India and Qatar. So although the article refers to a specific case scenario, what does this release mean? But in reality, the news piece is much deeper because we need to go back to 2022 before we understand this better. So we are talking about 2022. And in 2022 August, a strange development happened that erupted almost India's consistent and quite enriched bilateral ties with Qatar. Now, in August 2022, the Qatarian government suddenly arrested 7 Indian Navy personnel who were working in Qatar. Why was this done? The decision was not described much. The reasons were not highlighted much. They were just taken away at midnight and they were imprisoned. Until here, it was said that they are being arrested on the charges of espionage. Now, what are we talking about? We are talking about a situation where a foreign government arrests people, foreign nationals, on charges that they are acting like spies. In this case also, these people were arrested on charges of espionage. It was believed that these are working as Israeli spies. They are working as people who are promoting the Israeli agenda on India's behalf. But this was not taken well by India. Until here, the Indian government decided that even if they are arrested, fine. As per the Vienna Convention, they will still have all rights to access the consulate. They can consult the embassy. They can talk to Indian diplomats who are posted in Qatar. But situation became very, very ugly when suddenly the decision came in October 2023, where these people were now given capital punishment. They were now given death penalty. And this sent ripples across the global spectrum. That without a crime that has been much explained for, without charges that have been proven, how could 7 Indian Navy personnel be suddenly sentenced to death? And here, India then took strong diplomatic moves to stop this from happening. And this is exactly what the article here talks about. The article says how, on the charges of espionage, these people were arrested. Now, espionage particularly is a major international issue, by the way. So it is not something that's new for us. When we talk about espionage, we are talking about spies deployed by one country into another who can secretly, clandestinely pass information on ground to the heads of the native country. Now, probably in your modern history, when you have studied the Mauryan Empire, a very centrally administered empire, you might have read about the Akbar's regime. There as well, you've heard that how these ancient Indian empires were successfully built upon a very elaborate espionage system. It's a very age-old mechanism of government functioning. But today, when you talk about international politics, it becomes a major issue. In fact, this also reminds you of the Kulbhushan Yadav controversy, that how just a couple of years back, the International Court of Justice had reprimanded Pakistan and said that Pakistan has denied the protocols of your convention and it has not allowed Kulbhushan Yadav access to the consulate in his own defense. So such cases are very, very common. In fact, majority number of times, innocent fishermen, innocent localites, they often languish in foreign prisons on charges of espionage which are never really proven. And hence, this episode also highlighted the same phenomena. And therefore, the 7 personnel from Navy whom we are talking about were people who were employed with the Dahra Global Technologies and Consultancy firm, which works as Qatar's defense and security agencies. It works with them. So now what happened? Legal proceedings were getting delayed day by day, which was rising. It was increasing concerns at the Indian end. So Indian government then decided to take strong initiatives. Now what happened? India thought, what choices do we have? The first choice was to pressurize the Qatari government to actually investigate the case better, to actually make sure that all the people who are being charged for this criminal espionage are given right to access the Indian consulate. The second thing was, in case the legal proceedings take too much time, like it was happening in this case, another good solution is to take the help of international laws. Because even as per Article 110 of the Penal Code of Qatar, espionage is a critical crime and it could attract large punishment, anywhere from years of imprisonment to even death penalty, especially in situations of turmoil or war. In this light, it wasn't easy really to get these people acquitted on a charge as serious as this. And now, therefore, the Indian government decided to go also for legal intervention in case the situation gets worsened. So what legal interventions were available for India? Now, talking about options that India had to internationally intervene in the issue, in 2015, India and Qatar had an agreement between them. It was a bilateral agreement which said that in case the prisoners from either side are caught in one another's country, under the agreement of 2015, these people will have the choice of being charged in their home country. So they can be charged and they can be dealt with from their native country. So this was one clause that India constantly batted upon, because this meant that probably India would have the authority, or India would get the right as per the agreement to deal with the punishment of these people, regarding their acquittal. Another thing was that when you talk about the Vienna Convention that was signed much back in the 1960s, according to this convention, there are strict protocols and frameworks which decide the conduct of diplomatic relations between two countries or any countries involved. And similarly, the Article 36 of this Vienna Convention also says that in case somebody is arrested in a foreign country, there has to be an immediate consulate intervention. The person who is imprisoned has absolute right to get consulate intervention. So India also tapped upon this. Now, at the same time, situation was escalating. It was getting worse from 2023 October onwards. Now, at this point, India decided to diplomatically deal with the issue. Eventually, the recent acquittal of these people. Now, initially, the death penalty was reduced. Initially, it was then reduced only to few months of or few years of imprisonment. But now, later, after much weeks of debate, much weeks of diplomatic tussle, finally the people were acquitted. So this now is a very big, huge diplomatic victory of India over Qatar. In fact, immediately as the acquittal happened and these people came back to India, even the Honorable Prime Minister of India, Shri Modi, has announced his decision to visit Qatar. Now already he is in UAE, as we are aware, for the inauguration of the very famous temple that has come up, once again enshrining the policies of cooperation between UAE and India. In the similar light, while coming back from UAE, he has decided to pay a visit to Qatar. So this will again set another milestone, that not only was the acquittal of these people a big legal diplomatic victory for India, it meant wonders for the relations between two nations which are not from today, they are actually age old. Beginning somewhere in the 1960s when the Emir of Qatar had visited India and signed many bilateral economic cooperation deals. So on that note, this recent announcement of Shri Modi's visit once again would set a tune for further better cooperation between the two nations, because as I said, the ties between the two countries are age old. Now let's remember that both the countries are not only economically into a good bilateral relationship, but also talking about a navy exercise that happens between the two countries where intelligence sharing, geopolitical issues and state-of-the-art technology is transferred between them, between each other, is known as Zahir al-Bakr, the roar of the sea joint exercise that takes place between the Qatari Navy and the Indian Navy. It was initiated in Doha in Qatar back in 2019. Now let's also talk about raw materials. Let's talk about the energy sector. So Doha is the largest provider, rather Qatar is the largest provider of liquefied natural gas to India. At the same time, there is a huge population of expats from India who live in Qatar. In fact, about 25% of Qatari population is composed of Indian expats. So that means a huge segment of people from India, they are living and working in Qatar, contributing to the economic development of both the countries. So this comes out to be, say, about 7.5 lakh people of Indian origin in Qatar just in 2023. Apart from that, if you talk about the remittances, then the remittance sent to India from the community that is situated in Qatar, the Indian communities overseas, that comes out to be about $750 million annually. Now, apart from that, back in 2015, even the Qatari Emir had paid a visit to India. From that point onwards, there was a decision to lay a massive pipeline from Qatar onto the countries of West Asia and into India for better supply of gas and energy. So, as I said, the relation is age old. And now the recent development of how the Qatari government has cooperated and acquitted Indians who were captured from India, Indian Navy veterans, means once again a huge future prospect of bilateral ties between the both nations. Also, whatever development takes place after the Prime Minister's visit are yet to be seen. And now on that note, we can come to the second article for our mains discussion, and this pertains to GS Paper 1 Social Justice. The core of the article, what is the article all about, is how is India committing itself to bridge the gender divide that is existing in Indian workforce, digital, STEM education, healthcare sector, and overall health education sectors. So why are women misrepresented even today? That is the question. The answer comes in the form of an initiative that India has taken when India was hosting the G20 summit, which once again has been reiterated by India in the World Economic Forum in Davos. So we are talking about how the Indian government is committed that by 2047, about half of our workforce shall comprise of women. So we are talking about gender parity in workforce, but not just in workforce. We are also referring to the STEM education, which stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, Maths education, a set of skills that are pertinent because data-wise they have proven to boost the chances of employment in the formal sector of the economy. So in this light, this article talks about how India is now not only doing its own domestic efforts, but it is trying to create a global, a worldwide alliance to promote gender parity. So let's see in detail, let's break down the article. What does it talk about? So the article highlights that India has recently launched a platform. This is a global platform known as the Global Good, Gender Equity and Equality to achieve multi-sectoral gender parity. When we say multi-sectoral, we are saying that not just in one sector, but in various sectors of our economy. So multi-sector gender empowerment is the major theme behind the Global Good, Gender Equity and Equality platform. So now, in this light, the government had adopted, back when it was hosting the G20 summit in 2023, the government had spoken about the New Delhi Leaders Declaration. What was this declaration? This declaration meant that India will now strongly take steps to promote the ratio of females in schools, colleges, educations of higher excellence. Not only that, India will also have certain policy framework to make sure that even when it comes to corporate sector companies or government offices, there is a certain bare minimum representation of women that has to be made mandatory. In fact, when we talk about the 128th Amendment Bill or the Amendment Act, we are referring to the same thing. Here, we are talking about the Women Reservation Bill. Much earlier also, it had been tabled in the Parliament, but it was stalled because of political controversies. But now, as the 128th Amendment has seen the light of the day, it means that the government is also looking to provide 33% or rather one-third seats to be reserved in the Lok Sabha and state legislatures just for women. Do we need such interventions? That's again a bigger question. A lot of people often ask that, is giving reservation the right method of creating equality and women empowerment? So this means we need to understand the core of the problem. The real reason behind the problem is not that women do not get an opportunity to work in parliament or say for example panchayat, or why is the representation so low in state legislatures. The real problem lies in substantive representation. Now this could be a new word which is coming to the theme of this article. So although in Panchayati Raj institutions, ever since the 73rd, 74th Amendment Acts were created back in 1992, the government has been constantly providing one-third seats to be reserved for women, say for example in the local self-government. But even today, the representation is much lower than that. What could be the reason? If there is a possibility of women getting elected to political bodies, then why does it not happen? The problem is that whenever we provide women or any other vulnerable segment of society reservation, it is known as numerical representation, where we allow more women numerically to come and participate. But the real problem is, does numerical representation always gives birth to substantive representation? Now this is the question we need to ask. This is something that's missing, because talking about substantive representation, this is lost in sectoral or multi-sectionality of women. What is multi-sectionality of women? Now remember, In a country and a culture as diverse as India, women are not one consolidated, unified group. Always remember, women, this is at the core of all the economic, political and social problems that women face actually. So let's understand this carefully because that's the underlying theme of the whole article here. Now, women in India are not a homogeneous, consolidated group. Why do we say that? The reason is that Indian society, like most other societies, they have different kind of divisions and classifications. In India, when we talk about how is our society divided between different segments, so here there are many things that come in picture. One, of course, is class. That's your economic status, your, say, income, your family income, your asset ownership. That could be the economic criteria, the job that you do, the salary that you earn. Apart from that, we have other dimensions like tribe. We have tribal women, non-tribal women. We have women from different religions, India being a multi-religious, a poly-religious country. We have multiple castes within different religions. So if you talk about, say, for example, Hinduism, obviously there are caste divisions that exist, although they are now getting reduced in a major way, but they do exist. In this situation, women themselves, rather than being one unitary voice, they get completely divided into sectionality. Women come from different layers. You can have rich, poor segment. You can have upper caste, lower caste segment. You can have the Dalit women segment. You can have tribal, non-tribal women. You can have Hindu women and other religious women, women from other religious groups. You can have women who are stratified, they are diversified on the basis of region. There could be racial, ethnic differences between them, linguistic differences between them, and this itself gives birth to the problem of intersectionality among women. Women are deeply divided on caste, religion, tribe, language, regional, economic lines, and they are not one group. So whenever we provide reservation, like in the case of 128th Amendment, we think that we are giving a platform to the women of India. In reality, that doesn't happen because of intersectionality, once elected to power, women also, data proves that, it is a historical fact, that they actually have more allegiances to their caste, religion, tribal and regional groups. So, women welfare is not the top agenda that they will always pursue even when they are elected to power because they belong to different segments. And sometimes your loyalty to one segment supersedes from that of another. And in that case, substantive representation then becomes a dream. And that's the reality why most reservation policies do not actually show any ground improvement. So here also in this article, we are talking about something similar. That when we say that India has adopted the New Delhi's declaration or India has adopted the Global Good Platform for Gender Equity and Equality, will this lead to a substantive representation? That's exactly what the article is hinting at. Now, recently at the World Economic Forum also, the government has shown, it has proven what all steps does it plan to take to promote all-round economic empowerment and equality for women. So the government has clearly highlighted in the World Economic Forum that India will pay attention of the problem of digital divide. Now, the problem of digital divide, once again, neither does it have a rural urban dimension only, but it also has a deep gender dimension to it. So it's true that majority of women in India, they do lack digital higher education, as we spoke about STEM education. So it is because of gender norms, early marriage, it could be because of poverty, it could be because of religious, cultural taboos that women in India most of the times are not participating enough in science, technical and digital education, which means most of them are not employed in the formal or the organized sector of the economy. Another problem is that, but they need to work. They need to work to support their families, but they do not have STEM education, so what choice do they have? The only area available for work is unorganized GIG or platform work. But we know that whenever we talk about these sectors, we are referring to a sector of ghost occupations, where women automatically become victims of something that we discussed earlier, vulnerable hidden unemployment, low salary, no contractual job, no maternity menstrual leave, zero pension or medical benefit. So in that case, what happens? Necessarily, they are not performing any better. They are not experiencing any empowerment. In fact, they further suffer with the concept of social dumping, which is a lot of work-based exploitation. So the government is now trying to bridge the digital divide. Now the National Education Policy again comes into picture 2020 because it talks about mandatory smart digi classroom access to all schools, specifically government-run schools. This could be one strong solution to bridging the gender divide, at least of women and girls manifestation to it. It's intriguing, the connection between both. This is true because every time a climate disaster takes place, are invariably women. The reason is that whenever there is a climate tragedy that takes place, it is women generally who experience mass migration, reproductive exploitation. It shortens